we have to check the float adjustment. And so to check the float adjustment, we want the gasket off. We have the float put in place. There's a brand new Grossi jet inside here. That is the piece that allows the fuel to come and go. The float rises. Here's the float chamber. As the fuel comes in through the top here, it fills this little bowl up, and as it fills the bowl up, this float here, which we've floated in water to make sure it floats, goes up and down. When it goes up, it touches the bottom of the Grossi jet right here. The Grossi jet's just a regular jet, but it's improved. But you can see that the tab goes up, and I hope you can see as it goes up, it closes, it shoves the ball up and it closes that little valve. So what we want to measure right now is what is the float level. Now the float level is the level between the top of the float when you've got fuel in the bowl and the bottom of the machine casting. So what I do is I turn it upside down like this. I actually just use a regular old contractor's tape measure, and we'll take off the overflow for these purposes. If you look between the machine housing and the top of the float, now we're looking at the float, we're measuring to the top of the float right here. So that's what you're eyeballing, is about right here. You're not eyeballing down here. We don't want to over flood it. Unless you're in a race car, you don't need the float bowl to be this full anyway, but we're going to follow factory specs. So here's the level that you're measuring. It's from right there, almost where that piece of steel goes onto the top of the plastic float, and to this housing here, not down here. So if we put a measurement in there, we'll start at 4 inches, and we see that's perfectly adjusted at 5/16. So that's the factory measurement. We'll go ahead and put the gasket back on. Doesn't matter which way that gasket goes on here. And then we're going to put the top back on the carburetor here. And we'll fasten that up here in a minute. We have the new fuel line on here. This is an overflow line. We've got our factory nuts on there. We've got our renewed lifting pin. That's the pin they talk about. They call it a lifting pin. When you see it in the book, you can't see it when you're looking on the car, but it's right here. And you can see what that does. That lifts up the main piston and the carburetor, and that's what offsets your air and your fuel. So when you're doing your testing, when you do that, you raise the needle inside here, and as you can see, that enriches the position. We've got this connected together. We've still got some throttle linkage we're going to hook up on. That's coming from the zinc platers. We've got the throttle shafts and butterflies perfectly synchronized. Those are ready to go. This is the number 3 carburetor on the tri-carb, obviously, and you can tell that because it has the vacuum line. So this would be the rear carburetor. It's going to sit like that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to set this one off to the side here in a nice safe place. And what we're going to do is we'll bring in another carburetor. And the first thing I like to do is grab a paper towel, find a nice clean spot, and just give yourself a quick rub down on the whatever surface you're going to be working on, so you don't have any foreign matter getting into the work that you're going to proceed on. Okay, now let's get, I don't know if that's in the picture or not, but we'll leave that there. We can take the, we just did the number 3 carburetor. Let's take a peek at what the parts look like for the number one carburetor. 1 and 3 are different, or I'm sorry, 1 and 3 are the same, and 2 is completely different. And so we'll put the new parts out there and gently get going with this. We've got to keep up with the timeline, and so we want to start going through here real quick. I'm going to start putting the parts that we need right away and the parts that we don't need right away on here. On an HS4, this is called the jet assembly. And so we've got that. That's the piece once again. It connects to your choke linkage right here through that slot. But this is the one that's going to slide up. It bolts into the bottom of the float chamber. And this is going to slide up and down and determine your richness. So we're going to keep that right there. On this particular piece of work, we're not doing a full restoration. We just want them to work properly, and we want them to have a mostly original look to them. And so that's what we're going to stay focused on here. And so we've had those parts cleaned up. And what I'm going to start doing is we'll start making a stack of parts over here that we're going to leave that'll be leftovers. And then we're going to put a stack of parts over here that we're going to actually use on the project. As we talked about, this is called the Grossi jet, and it's just an improved style really of the factory jet that comes with it. But they're much stronger when it comes to shutting the fuel supply off, and much more reliable, so you'll get better hot starting conditions. And I think these cost $10 and who cares. So we're going to have a Grossi jet in there. This is the main needle, and it's the appropriate needle for the car, and I see no wear in the spindle. We're going to offer up this needle into the main piston body, and I don't know if you can see, but right here there's a line, and that line is what we're going to use to line up inside the bottom of that piston, not inside it, but we're going to line this up directly at the bottom of the piston. You want to make sure these are not bent, so you can kind of tweezle them in your fingers like that, spin them around, make sure they're not bent. If you drop it, you will bend it, but typically they're never going to be bent. You can set this here now. There's a bunch of holes around here. This is not threaded. That's the slot that we have in our carburetor body so that it slides up and down properly. And then here we have a little plug, and this goes right in there, and it's got a minus head on it, and so I just go ahead and set that into there as such. And then some of these jets have a flat spot on them. This one doesn't. It's completely round, so you just find a good spot in there. We've already cleaned it. And I'm going to line that up exactly so that the bottom exactly presents itself on that little kick out on the needle to the face of this piston right here. And now I'm going to use my faithful tool. Okay, I've just touched down. And now I'm going to eyeball it one more time. That might be just slightly high. There we go. That looks perfect. And now we snug it up quite neatly. And now the important part is we don't want to lay this needle, since it's brass, it'll bend. We don't want to lay that on anything. So I like to put it up in the air like that. That works.